Hi, I'm Thomas Hare. I'm the Chief Content Officer of the Performance Driven Marketing Institute, a not-for-profit trade association that serves companies in the performance and direct-to-consumer marketing industry. We welcome you, our entire team, CEO John Yarrington, myself, and our entire team welcome you to PDMI West at the Intercontinental San Diego. We're really, really happy to be here this week. We'd like to thank the hotel for their hospitality. Hope you guys are enjoying the hotel so far and everything it has to offer. I'd also like to thank our entire team for working so hard to make this event happen. It's always tricky pulling these together, especially in the post-COVID era with how things have changed, with how you all register and how you all wait to do your hotel rooms and all this stuff. And it's always a tricky time for us, but we pulled it together, had our best registration month ever in September, and also have the most badges that we've sold since COVID. So thank you all for making that happen. We appreciate it. We'd like to thank our 125 member companies and nearly 40 sponsoring companies for their support, including Pacific Media Technologies, who is the education sponsor this week. PMT team has shared a few videos to share with you over the next couple days. Here's one now.
I started PMT to apply the principles that I learned in the live television business to the DR delivery business. What makes PMT different is our people and their dedication to this industry. Quality is the key to what we do, and as the DR business changes, we'll be changing with it and we'll be ahead of the game.
Pacific Media Technologies. Technology driven, quality guaranteed.
So thank you again, PMT, for your support. And we're getting it started. Currency conversion is the topic of our first session. We're very, very fortunate to have this group here, headed by Delia Marshall, the moderator from ICOF. Welcome. Tara Francischini from LiveRamp, Joseph Gray from iSpot TV, DR Metrics, and Ross McCrae from VideoAmp. Welcome all. Thank you for being here. Take it away.
Sounds good. Can everyone hear me okay? Thanks, Tom, for having us. We're thrilled to be here, and I think we're especially excited to be starting the week with all of you because we know PDMI is an event that's all about bringing together folks in our industry, talking about what opportunities and challenges we have ahead of us in the performance marketing industry. And I think this conversation regarding currency is probably the most dynamic, the most edgy, the most the topic that so many of us might feel unsure about. And so hopefully today we're able to answer some of your questions, help you understand what opportunities there are that lay in front of you, and certainly think about what sort of watch-outs you want to be aware of as you navigate this new world of currency. So I have probably the best three people to talk about this topic that you could find across the country. And I have got Tara Francischini, who's the head of industry at LiveRamp. She focuses on advanced TV solutions for the market and brings to that role over 20 years experience leading video investment across some of the biggest buying agencies in the country. Joseph Gray, Joe comes from iSpot. So Joe founded a competitive insights platform, DR Metrics, about 10 or 12 years ago, sold that to iSpot, and is the Senior Vice President of Direct Response Solutions. So he's certainly in the right place. And Ross McCrae, who is the founder and CEO of VideoAmp. Thank you for joining us. Certainly a platform that's at the center of the currency conversation, talking about currency measurement, optimization, all words that today are very much used interchangeably, and we're going to hopefully start to kind of peel them apart for you. So thank you all for joining us.
Great to be here.
To do a quick level set on the topic, I think we're all very familiar with what's been going on the last couple years with Nielsen. So back in 2021, Nielsen lost its accreditation from the Media Ratings Council. It just earned that back earlier this year. But in that timeline, what has happened is other data sources, other platforms have risen to the top to give us alternative media currencies. So think currency, not measurement. This is about how we as buyers and advertisers can evaluate and understand the value of the media we're buying and use that to drive negotiation. So that's what we're gonna focus on talking about today. Joe, I'm gonna start with you. We know the folks in the room here are very much coming from a performance-first perspective. Historically, you've spent your career in performance marketing, as have I. We know performance marketers tend not to put so much weight on reach and frequency and traditional ratings points, but instead look at measured response and sales to evaluate the media and to negotiate based on that. How do you see this alternative currency as an opportunity for performance marketers that maybe otherwise haven't talked that much about currency?
Well, first of all, good morning, everyone, and thanks for setting me up with that really challenging question for this crowd. Tara, thank you for being here. Ross, thank you. We really appreciate you guys being here. You know, these three companies up here, LiveRamp, iSpot, VideoAmp, are disruptors in an industry that's been pretty static for 50 years. We haven't had competition, we haven't had innovation, but all that's changing. And since I knew you were going to ask me that question, Dalia, I wrote up some thoughts, and I'll share them with the group now. There are some really exciting things that are happening with big data and connected TV technology. I mean, we're all aware of the rapid rise of streaming and connected TV advertising, of course, but there are also big data and TV measurement breakthroughs, which really have led to what we're calling new or alt currency. So really, in a sense, currency is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to TV measurement, capabilities and solutions. So the performance-based or direct response industry has used what I often refer to as DR variations to measure the results of our TV campaigns. An example of this today might be the use of a dynamic QR code. And of course, that would change by network. We also use differing phone numbers, mobile text messaging variants. And these are really considered the sort of the classic direct response approaches. And for decades, calculating our media efficiency ratio has served us better than adopting traditional audience metrics. But times have changed. We know that consumers may view commercials across different networks, and today that could be on linear, CTV, and even streaming before they respond. Thanks to technology and big data, we now have the opportunity to measure that. Now, in contrast, the classic DR approach is essentially a last touch attribution model, which I think everyone knows is a little antiquated. We wouldn't use that kind of model online. Why should we use it in television long term if there are alternatives, improvements? So I think it's important that we learn a little bit about how smart televisions, connected TV devices, ACR, which stands for Automated Content Recognition, and big data, how all these things have come together to help advertisers like never before. So here's something else to think about. Direct response agencies have long struggled to put a square peg in a round hole, as it relates to hybrid, digitally native advertisers. Sometimes we'll refer to them as brand DR or brand direct, right? And these are advertisers who want to brand their name or maybe their .com, but they don't want to use /TV1, TV2, those types of approaches that we've tried as an industry to make our model fit with those more branded advertisers. Over the past couple of years, I've witnessed how technology and big data is helping agencies and advertisers, measure across tens of millions of smart devices, smart TVs, cable boxes, the household ad exposures that precede the consumer action. So instead of the classic DR approach, again, last touch attribution, these advertisers are using cross-platform, linear, CTV, and streaming, multi-touch attribution models to better optimize their TV investments. And they're able to achieve all of that without compromising their brand, without having to use the /TV1, TV2 approach. So, to answer the question, I do think the performance industry is adopting and will continue to adopt new measurement and currency solutions. And look forward to talking more about that today.
Good. That's very exciting. I do think, You know, one of the things that we've seen in the industry is adopting some of those platforms that you referenced has allowed advertisers to maybe go after media that they would have deemed too expensive and not likely to pay out, things like that. So it gives you, you know, you can push the edges, you can invest a little bit more and get a better return, scale where you might have been a little bit stuck in the corner. So I think that's exciting for performance marketers today. Ross, I have a question for you. So with VideoAmp, you're obviously at the center of this, as iSpot is, and Comscore and others. Can you talk to us about what type of adoption trends you're seeing? Are people running kind of legacy systems alongside? Are they jumping in the lake with both feet?
Great question, and good morning, everybody. So I think give you a trend of what we're seeing at VideoAmp, maybe starting with 5 or 6 quarters ago. You mentioned the Nielsen de-accreditation. You know, I'd say about 18 months ago, we started seeing some tests. We got a couple holding companies and smaller agencies and brand directs engaging in tests, what I would call side-by-sides, and actually doing real guarantees. So like, what if I were to have changed my currency and to have said, all right, I'm still buying on legacy, but give me another side report to say if I were to have guaranteed on VideoAmp, what would it look like? And simultaneously to that, we had a lot of our negotiations going to get all the big agencies and some of the brands directly and all the media sellers operationalized to be able to do that in prime time. We're kind of working in earnest. And so since then, VideoAmp rolled kind of announcing over the last year or so, kind of all the major media sellers to be able to operationalize on it kind of ahead of this broadcast year, from Paramount, Warner Discovery, NBCU, Fox, A&E, AMC, the Weather Channel, Amazon, Roku, Disney, and some others that I'm missing. And so we got pretty much the entire ecosystem now since a year ago onboarded and are doing currency guarantees. And in the upfronts, we got all the major agencies, independents and holdcos and some large brands directly getting into this phase 2, which are actual guarantees. And so we have seen sort of from the 18 months period on those examples, some started to peel off and do some tests. Usually it was about 10 to 15% of their linear budget they would peel off. Okay. And on digital, kind of roughly the same. And then, so since that, people started testing and getting measurements, and now, really as of a few weeks ago, kind of when the upfronts, kind of ended, and now the new broadcast season, which is a big part of how, at least on our side, the currency deals went, we saw a very large uptick. So we kind of went from like away from the what if testing into the real testing. We got about 10 advertisers, and 30, then 50, then like 100, and now we're about like 250 advertisers that are guaranteeing on our currency as of a few weeks ago. And if you double click into that, that goes across all major agencies, across all the publishers. So it's no longer like one agency or one publisher. It's usually 5 to 7 different publishers on a guarantee, every single vertical, and all the major agencies. And inside of that, we have some clients going 100% all in with no Nielsen. So there's a small handful of advertisers doing that. I'd say maybe 6%, 7% are just going all in. And then we have some networks that are going only on VideoAmp, like the Weather Channel. There's no Nielsen anymore. So it's just VideoAmp as of the broadcast year. So it's kind of a 2-legged stool. So anybody who's buying the Weather Channel is exclusively on us on that side, on parts of the inventory. And then outside of the kind of 100%, which is the smaller amount on the sell side and on the buy side, really it's in the distribution of where the majority of it is. And it's still a small percentage, about 20% now on linear. Sports is kind of an untapped territory that's moving, but like usually entertainment and stuff's about 20%. And on digital, it's moving pretty fast. And the digital stuff is going between buying directly from an ad server. So if you're just buying around a network, your currency is really the ad server. So $30 CPM, you're getting it from Freewheel, or you're getting it from your ad server, or programmatic. And there's been a lot of tests that show what happens when you're buying an audience that you think you're getting versus actually getting guarantee on the back end. And there's been a very fast push towards digital streaming currency because of the identity problems and when clients think they're actually buying an audience, they're actually getting on average about 12% of that. That's what we've seen across about 300 campaigns because of the identity problem. So people are very nervous on buying programmatic and are very nervous on buying digital because of the cookie issues and IPs and the expansion. So performance advertisers are looking at those things and looking at their actual conversions and what their assumptions are, and the savvy ones are aggressively throwing that away because it is a gold rush of there's so much waste in terms of what you actually think you're getting, and that a currency guarantees you elimination of those wastes, and we've seen very large upticks in performance. So those are kind of the high level. So we're doing a couple $2 billion run rate at this point from zero a year ago on currency guarantees.
That's, it's fascinating. I think the identity thing is certainly we want to talk about next. But before we do, it's interesting to hear, I definitely noticed some heads nod when you mentioned Weather Channel, for example. With, adoptions with a big network like that, do you see that, are you already seeing or hearing the anticipation that the agencies will fall next, or I shouldn't say fall, will jump next, and advertisers to make sure that they're
That was the
embracing
strategy. We did a 10-year deal with Byron, and I hated that deal. Did not want to do that stupid deal. And we did the deal because the bet was that group is so aggressive that they will literally mandate.
Yeah.
Whereas others are kind of hired guns and they're nervous and whatever. He's like, I'm getting misrepresented, and this is not true. It's hurting everybody. So if you want to buy the Weather Channel, this is how you got to do it. And so we went from like those 200 numbers of advertisers are not including the Weather Channel. So we have now, we're still calculating, but hundreds and hundreds of additional advertisers that were from the I guess call it the conservative or I don't want to test group that got forced to test into that all the way down through. So even the ones that you think were the last adopters got moved into the systems through the agencies, through the billing, through the whole systems, and now that's kind of an opportunity for us to go in, and now that you're actually off of a currency, which has been a monopoly for 50 years, getting from 0 to 1 has been such a large jump, and then we've seen fast scale forward. So we did that deal, not because it was great for us or profitable, but because we think it was going to really drive everything else while the top down's coming into that. But it wasn't because of that deal. Every single agency, every single holding company has been using us before this deal. It's just now the penetration of those from it being 20% of their accounts to now 100% of their accounts in a small subsection, whereas others are kind of quickly following in distribution.
Well, and I think that will impact the DR agency because so many people here know Weather Channel is great for performance marketers, certainly. Back to the identity conversation. So Tara, LiveRamp is considered best in class in terms of that. We know what we're doing now. We're moving from, or we have the opportunity to move from 45,000 households on a panel-based legacy system, as you said, that's been around for 50 years, to data sets that are 30 to 40 million households. And so stitching together ACR data that you referenced, set-top box data, the resolution of that identity is so important. So how do you guys view that?
Well, we believe the future of measurement lies in a foundation of strong, interoperable identity. It's key to better counting. So the whole problem with Nielsen is miscounting, greater accuracy, more effective measurement, and more efficient optimization. So data is in everything we do now. And the value of that data is what you do with it. So good, deterministic, people-based identity really leads to more accurate, more effective cross-screen measurement and personalization across the entire ecosystem. So it's really required. Identity consolidates and resolves all the fragmentation, everything you need to really drive effective cross-screen measurement. Data protection, data resolution, they're critical for speed, accuracy, as you kind of test these multiple currencies. We see it as, the foundation of everything you do and the future of cross-screen measurement, from reporting to data collaboration, the spectrum of measurement, like use cases. It's really critical.
And just to add on to that, so folks that are in the room that are considering testing and maybe doing some side-by-side testing, as Ross laid out, is that something that they should worry about, or that they should be looking at the currency provider to have solved for them?
It can go both ways, but really they should be looking into it. Just to give an example, 5 years ago I was at an agency doing the video investment buying, and honestly we really didn't talk about identity. Now I talk to my colleagues now 5 years later and it's almost all we talk about. So it's something that's pretty new, but also so needed. And you know, the one thing I want to say, publishers need to be interoperable. They need to have partnerships and they need to invest in an identity that's interoperable. The same thing for agencies and marketers. Everyone needs to be looking into identity and its interoperability for effectiveness, for accuracy, to really drive your journey through measurement and this new space and this evolution.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. It's funny that it's something, as you said, 5 years ago, but I would say even 3 years ago
3 years
among
ago, right.
agencies and advertisers. Your numbers certainly would suggest that it just has become a huge part of the conversation today. Ross, you mentioned, you know, the opportunity that this data brings for advertisers to develop custom audiences, and I think especially performance advertisers are looking to figure out how to avoid waste.
Yeah.
So how do you think New Currency allows them to really embrace custom audiences and understand waste?
Yeah, this is my favorite question.
Good.
When we started the business, the mission was to increase the value of advertising, and everything we do is to follow that suit. So what's the point of currency? What's the point of measurement or identity? I mean, every one of these touch points, the way that we think about it is like it needs to increase the value of advertising, and everyone wins. The buy side, the sell side, the consumer, if you follow that chain. So the way that we think about it as a framework on a high level is there are some things that, to kind of use some of the words that we've used already on this panel, how do you value your advertising? And there's a whole spectrum of sophistication there. There's the last touch example that you gave, which unfortunately isn't even the lowest, because we see a lot of clients that are just valuing their media on a cost per GRP or just cost per impression, right? I don't know what's worse. It's like, we don't need to debate that, right? But it's bad, right? And then there's like last touch, and there's even, and there's, you know, MTA, and then there's lift. There's the whole kind of constituency about the sophistication of which you're thinking about the value of your touch points that's deduplicated. Are you in a silo, or are you looking across all your touch points and to valuing your media, kind of step one. So there's some optimizations to be had there, just for, I think, the obvious. Then there's the next side, which is how do I think about designing my audience, and identity is a big piece of this. And so a client that comes, and even though you're not necessarily, even for the most DR-focused advertisers, very rarely are you getting guarantees from your outcome. You know, and even if you do, there's probably some arbitrage that the other side's taken away from you. So you'd want to think about it as what you're still buying an audience, right? If you're not getting a guaranteed outcome. And so this is where I think currency starts to come into play, is because you need to, when you're doing a contract, and I'm going to give you X amount of money for Y units. What's the units? Is it an impression? Is it freewheel? Is it Nielsen? Is it video amp? And what's the audience am I buying on that, and what's my rate? So no matter what, even if you're optimizing all day long to the left, and you're on lift, incrementality, you're best in class, deduplicated for the value media or your last touch, it doesn't matter. You need to take the output here and then go and buy your media, and you're negotiating on some rate. That in the contract is where your currency is. And there's optimization to be had in that tranche as well. Why? Because when you're thinking about your guaranteeing, whether you're guaranteeing on getting a certain amount of eyeballs that are this audience or that audience, or on a Nielsen panel or a video amp currency set, that has a causation or correlation into your outcome here. And there's all these kind of discrepancies to say, if I were to go buy this audience type, that's 10,000 or 10 million people versus this broad demo, if your CPM is a $20 CPM here or a $10 CPM here, the amount of impressions you're getting delivered from your buy directly impacts your value. So there's a whole nother layer of translation when it comes down to maximizing your buys and your CPMs upward that way. And then lastly, it gets into the identity. If you're buying an audience that you think is, and your MTA models or your lift or last touch says this is kind of what's happening, even if you're going to outcomes, if you start with a list of 10 million people, and then you go and you buy that, and what you get back is only 12% of that, which is again the averages that we're seeing across billions of dollars, That's the problem. And I think people talk about identity a lot now, a lot more than they did. I agree with you. What I think people aren't talking enough about is the chain of custody of identity, meaning everyone's nerding out about I have the most accurate identity graph all day long, and they spend all of their time competing against each other to say my graph's better than everybody else's, and it's the most deterministic and the most privacy safe all day long. Then what happens is they send this, it starts in the brand CRM, and then it goes to a DMP or a CDP, and then it goes from here into an agency, and then it goes from an agency into a DSP or an ad server, and then it goes, and sometimes even intermediaries, and then it goes back all the way this way. So it's not even about how accurate your identity is. It's about when you translate from hop, everyone else is translating and saying this IP is that IP, this household is that household, and it doesn't matter how good your identity is in the beginning because you're not even getting anything close to that when it gets delivered. So from an accuracy perspective, if you're not tracking how your audiences are being translated, and if you're using third-party like IPs versus signed-in users or PII from the beginning all the way down, you're buying randomly, and then you're paying higher CPMs. So you think you did all this work, and you're like, oh, I'm super smart, I'm gonna buy this audience because it's really high, and then you did all the math, and then you're not even getting what you negotiated for.
Well, and without currency, you don't even know that that's your problem, right?
You don't know, and then if without measurement to measure the outcome on the impact, none of this works because you're just randomly guessing. And so what we've done is, another fun stat, about 95% of all of our campaigns for currency has outcomes attached to it. We're not guaranteeing on the outcomes, but basically every single thing from 0 to billions, almost all of them has had an outcome report attached to it to help guide how to optimize the currency and see how it's working, which has never been done historically. And that has been what has allowed us to see the value, especially for performance marketers, so they can A/B test. And that's why we can see all this gold rush opportunity.
Yeah, I was going to say, if there's anyone left in the room who thought maybe they don't have to care about this, that's why you do. This is absolutely for performance marketers.
And we've put out about 100 case studies,
Yeah.
and by kind of verticals, and we're seeing conversion rates and eCPMs anywhere from 30 to 80% increase across hundreds of campaigns, across all verticals, across a variety of different public. That's how bad it.
Yeah.
When your legacy currency is so wrong, and your identity is so screwed, it's such a low standard that like just doing anything remotely close to helpful increases ROI exponentially.
Right, there's only up from here.
Well, there are different versions of identity too, and I just want to clarify. So when we're speaking about, there are better and worse identities. You want deterministic people-based identity to continue householding and making sure that personalization through the ecosystem is there. So I think that you're totally right. We are all like still testing and learning in this space, even with identity, but it's still the foundation, and you need, a neutral, interoperable partner to kind of lean on to kind of help you through all the hops he was talking about.
Yeah, it's both. It's both.
Yes.
And I would say buying on persona is maybe new for this audience. It's not the standard approach that's used in linear execution by performance-based advertisers. That said, when you get into streaming and CTV, you need to start thinking about persona. At iSpot, we work with a lot of different vendors, LiveRamp included, companies that enable this persona-type media buying. And to Ross's point, it's so efficient. It increases your results so exponentially. It's an amazing opportunity, but again, you need to have that kind of targeting, and you need to be looking at the measurement and the results from that.
Yep.
And this is a crowd that understands that at the end of the day. So
Yep.
once it becomes normalized, watch out.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be incredibly powerful in the hands of performance marketers for sure.
Yeah.
Joe, one of the things that we're kind of hearing as some of these advertisers and agencies have started to adopt alternative currencies is that it's telling maybe a different story of who the audience is from some of this programming than we all thought. In some cases we're hearing is the audience maybe a little bit younger or maybe a little bit more diverse than we thought originally. Certainly that would explain why the Weather Channel is, ensuring that everyone adopts this because they're sort of being graded unfairly, it would seem. What are you hearing in terms of what the outcomes are?
Well, iSpot's been working with brands for many years, and sort of like we built our methodology around the needs of brands. And how many of you, just by a show of hands, have ever been to iSpot.tv to watch a commercial or to look up a television spot? Right?
How many have it bookmarked on their cell phone?
You know, iSpot's interesting in that they've created this this huge database that goes back, you know, a decade or more, where they've tracked across linear all of these TV spots, and that legacy data and the iSpot impressions is there for historical use cases. So if you want to trade on a currency, and you can go back and say, what if? I can go back and look at my prior executions. What if I was trading on this currency? What would that look like? I think that's a powerful feature. And these advertisers are, you know, obviously doing exactly what I just described, and they're seeing opportunities. And a lot of them are being enabled to do what I call Nielsen arbitrage. And this is something DR advertisers understand, especially on the agency side. You know, I started to see some 15 years ago when I was on the agency side, if I layered standard quote data and Nielsen impression data over, you know, performance-based DR rates, I would start to see in certain day parts like daytime that the CPMs equivalency of what we were paying was maybe higher than what a lot of brand advertisers were paying in that day part. The concept of being able to find those opportunities and exploit them, that is a really interesting facet. So as advertisers are experimenting and they're using multi-touch attribution and they're starting to realize, hey, I can really optimize, I'm seeing a different picture than I've seen before, and now if I am going to trade on traditional currency, I can use these insights to find those opportunities and exploit them. And that's exciting. That's an exciting opportunity. So I hear lots and lots of stories about that.
Yeah.
I got a comment on that one.
Yeah.
So almost 10 years ago, God, one of my first meetings I started the business was with the chairman of Group M, and he was educating me on that. And he was like, why do I want an accurate currency? Because let me tell you how we made our bones, and the whole arbitrage part of that.
Yeah.
And so I've been thinking about that for 10 years. And we've been running experiments about continuing doing that, so buying on a broad-based demo, whatever you want to call it, 18 to 49, but you're measuring. And by the way, that's how we've, let me be honest, like before currency, the first 7 years, we were all measurement. We weren't doing currency, so we were the #1 provider of this, to be clear, about people using us for measurement and planning to then do that. So we're very familiar with people using us for measurement and planning, but not currency. Not because we wanted to, but just because the industry, we're here now today. Cool. So one of the biggest questions that we get from the last 7 years of selling customers this ability to now it's currency. Which one do I do, right? So you can imagine how that's come across our plate. And what we've learned is that there's kind of like levels, as always. There's just no optimization, and then there's using the arbitrage, which has some benefit for advertisers for sure. What we've seen recently with some of the currency stuff is there's some levels of optimization that only the sell side can do, that just arbitraging is limited. So let me give you a concrete example. What you can do on arbitrage is you can shift, a buyer can shift, one of the levers is shifting budget around. I'm going to do more budget to this network day part, or less budget here and more money on this digital site and less money here, budget shifting around. That's always a buyer's control, right? The second is the audience design. What audience am I choosing, by which partner, and what CPM should I pay for that? Like, those are buy-side levers through and through, and those are things that a buyer always has to do. And you can arbitrage in that way. When you go to currency and you have the information symmetry, so you're not saying buying an 18 to 49, but optimizing on this, but you're converging to the same. What the sell side has the ability to do is the following. On linear, usually you're not buying a spot on linear. You're not buying this 15-second spot at this time. You're usually getting a rotator of some, whether I've seen it go from 8 hours, right? Some are 4, some are 8, and there's hundreds of spots individual in those dynamics, guess who chooses that? Not the buyer, the seller. Why? Because for a million reasons, competitive reasons, like just flighting, operational, you can't put the same ad back to back to back, all these kind of dynamics. The question now is, what's the distribution of those 300 spots, and how much is spot A or spot 1 to spot 200 or spot 300 better for you? Very different. So what's happening is, if you don't give the seller the actual audience you're trying to maximize to, you're randomly the seller is randomly choosing which spot to get, and no matter how sophisticated you are as a buyer, it doesn't matter what you do, if you don't give some information, you're losing that tranche of value, number one. The second on digital is similar to targeting. You can do buy-side audience targeting, and this is similar back to the identity situation, where best in class is programmatic and one-to-one frequency capping and all these kind of things for sure. But if the identity isn't really there in the right place, congrats, you're frequency capping on 4, but you're really not even doing it to the right person because it's a different person in the first place. So it's an illusion. So the sell side has developed technologies with us and some others in clean rooms, and what that does is it allows you to do direct PII sync in a privacy-safe environment where you can send your audience direct to them on emails or first names, last names. The sell side can do targeting on that. The buy side will never be able to because of privacy reasons, and they're never giving their PII outside of a clean room to say, here's all my PII, go target. But when you're logging into Disney Plus or Hulu or any streaming application, all of it signed in, they know exactly who the signed user is, and that's super accurate. So when it comes down to targeting, you want the sell side to target on first name, last name, email address, because it's privacy compliant more than the first place, and they only have that ability. So the world's changing in terms of how to drive ROI from what we're seeing, and learning how to lean into those things is kind of beneficial, and we're seeing the ROI changes. And to answer your question on the audiences, we've seen a lot of changes on audiences, and some things that just were strange if you ask us. I mean, there's something that are public that you guys can look into. The Amazon Thursday Night Football is a classic one. We're very deeply involved in that, and you can see how, again, you can look up, this is public online, that Nielsen is measuring streaming for Amazon Thursday Night Football, and they're using their panel, and it's just way off, right? And then Amazon's like, hey, we kind of know the truth. You kind of have to log on to Amazon to do that. You know, I don't know, you want to trust this 40,000 and extrapolating it randomly, or you want to literally have the one-to-one counts. We process the one-to-one counts. We audit that, we check that, we review that. So what we do is we check the differences, and audiences are all over the place, from Amazon to football to everything else. Some places, when you're looking at the truth set, if you believe that every single person logging in is more accurate than a panel, you first have to believe that. Most people do. What people think is old, we've seen as young. What people think is good, we've seen as bad. What people think is male is female. The football is crazy. A lot more females than we ever thought.
The
watching
Swifties?
on football. So there's like, whoa.
Yeah.
There's a lot of changes.
I think you even see it with how fast channels are growing in popularity.
Yeah.
Like, we thought it was going to be Netflix. We
Yeah.
want exactly this premier content. No, actually, sometimes people want to you don't know what you can find. And I feel like we're seeing that in the whole transformation of the ecosystem. As fast channels get more popular, the lean back experience, is TikTok TV, is a question I ask myself all the time. But all this stuff, I think that it's so interesting to uncover all these insights, and it can really affect your placements and your investment. And then the impact. It's so interesting, and it's evolving at a really fast pace.
Yeah, I don't think we have to convince this audience
Yeah.
that there are problems with legacy currency.
Yep.
I think we've been comparing against it for years, and the general consensus is, if we were to buy our media based on those metrics versus the more last touch attribution model we use, we'd never hit our goals, right? We never hit the KPIs, we'd never hit our ROAS. So, but just to add a little bit to support what Ross has said about inaccuracies with legacy, a good friend of mine, his name is Frank Foster. He used to be the president of Aaron Media. I don't know if anyone remembers Aaron Media, but they used to be in all the trade press many, many years ago. The first company to take box level data and challenge Nielsen, because the technology's saying one thing and Nielsen's saying something completely different. Frank used to describe for me where they plot it out in different markets, And, you know, Nielsen wave would go up and the box level data views would go down. Like there's literally no correlation at all. And some years later, Google started a collaboration with Dish. They called it Google TV, not to be confused with the consumer product, but this was a bid environment based on box level CPMs, which again was very experimental back in the day. And so I'm in New York, I'm talking to the folks there at Google TV, and I said, I noticed that you guys just layered legacy Nielsen data on top of your actual box level data. What's that looking like? And the guys look at me and they said, it looks pretty good. You know, Nielsen's relatively accurate. And I said, wow, really? I said, have you done a case study? Is there something I can look at? Yeah, we just finished one, and Nielsen did really great. So I said, what was the study based on? And the guy says, the Super Bowl. I mean, how do you get that wrong? So I said to him, look, that's crazy. And I just gave him a little bit of background, you know, told him the story of Aaron Media. And he said to me, look, we've got to play nice with Nielsen. That was the comment. So I think we've known there have been countless data points over the years that the legacy currency is just not useful. But what we're talking about today is something of scale, with real measurement, with technology that's never existed before. And boy, what an exciting time to be in this industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think we're all sort of getting the bug here of what this trend can do for our industry. I would say I know a lot of folks in the audience, Tara, are on the sales side, and Ross kind of touched on this a little bit.
Right.
But how would you speak specifically to the sell side and how they can help the industry adopt this maybe more quickly?
Right. Well, I think the benefits to the sell side are amazing, right? So better counting means better valuation of your inventory. You can increase ad revenue. You know, you can improve profit margins, and you know what? You can meet the market where they are. So to do those things, you need interoperable identity. You need multiple partnerships with multiple measurement partners. You need to accept the market where they are. It is a spectrum of sophistication, I would say, on where marketers and brands and agencies are in their measurement journey. And I think the sell side needs to be just flexible, being able to pivot. They need to be, and you know, that means accepting all the demand that comes their way, no matter where that person is in their measurement journey. So, you know, it's all good. This is better counting, better valuation. So they should invest in identity. They should be investing in, you know, integrations with multiple measurement partners, just preparing themselves to kind of accept where the market is, and then also to get better counting for their cross-screen inventory, better valuation, better ways to you know, maximize revenue, improve profit margins, no matter the line of business that, you know, that inventory is sold through, and then really making their customers happy, meeting market demand.
Yep, I think that's great advice. I'd like to start to wrap up by going down the line and asking you guys to share first, you know, for this audience, what would you suggest as sort of a watch out or a caution or something to be aware of as you jump into the world of new currency? And Tara, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I'm gonna just say identity again, but making sure that it is interoperable, deterministic, people-based, because yes, it is complicated. There are a lot of hops, but as we go on this measurement journey, we are gonna end up with data collaboration in clean rooms, and this is something that will prepare you for what's now and what's in the future. And then the other thing I would say, the difference between measurement and currency. We're talking about these use cases where you transact, but advanced measurement is still there and the benefits are still there. So you brought up the Super Bowl. You might guarantee the Super Bowl on Nielsen or on VideoAmp or on iStat, you might guarantee, but you might also invest in another measurement partner that can show you the outcomes and stuff like that. So I think realizing that there is a path to currency and there's a path to advanced measurement, and both are important.
Thanks. Joe, how about you? What would be your watch out for the group?
Well, I think that a lot of us get trapped into silos in how we attack this measurement business. I think you have to take a holistic view. You really have to do it across streaming, you have to do it across CTV, and you have to do it across linear, multi-touch attribution. Let's use the same KPI across that entire spectrum. So holistic, complete end-to-end type of solution, because when you get siloed into the process, you just lose a lot of the value.
Okay, thank you. Ross, how about you?
There's two things that every single client has gotten to the same spot and got caught up on.
Okay.
We're way past the publishers support this. That was my nightmare for the last 3 years. We're way past these, every holding company, every agency knows how to go between alternative A versus B in translation. We're way past that. Is it interoperable into billing systems like Mediation? We're way past that. There's education that we got to keep doing, of course, like that is early, but when it comes down to doing it, there's two things every single time that happens. First is you get a new CPM. As a buyer, let's just say it's the same demos. 18 to 49 before, it was $12, now it's 13, what do you do? Or if it's 11, what do you do? Mm-hmm. Every single time is a new CPM. Or are you saying it's the same CPM? And what does that mean? If it's the same CPM, what if the ratings before and afterwards are higher on Video Amp or lower because there's differences? What does that mean for you? So every single time that has been a question. Then the second, every single time has been when it goes up to procurement and it goes into the CFO, when it hits your MMM models, and somebody has been the entire marketing department is being budgeted on some procurement-driven model about impact of marketing. And it's usually in GRPs when I've seen 90% of them. And when those GRPs change, because your currency is changing, what happens to your model? And what does the CFO and the board say? And really what really gets to the point is when the CMO or whoever is involved goes and tells people who are not in this industry, like a CFO, oh, by the way, everything we've been doing has been wrong. And they don't know Nielsen, they don't know any of this.
Right.
They're like, what do you mean? I just gave you a promotion 6 weeks ago on this number, and that you saying that you drove all this. Now you're telling me that this is wrong and we're changing the currency? How does that change? Whoa, what? And this is not our industry. This is somebody who's never heard of Nielsen or knows anything of truth, and you got to go tell someone who knows nothing about anything to explain how it's not really my fault that I've been doing all this. It's been 50 years in a monopoly, and now this is the first time ever, and let alone if you get through the agency. And most agencies are about to get fired.
Right.
So, CMOs have a 21-month average tenure. Agencies are becoming the same. So every single person is scared to go and tell someone about how the things they've been doing has been wrong. And so I can't think of one example that hasn't gotten to those two areas and a pause or been like, holy shit.
Well,
every
clearly we're going
time.
to give them the video of this panel to take to procurement to the CFO to feel
And
more
sometimes I've seen it go like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
And you see culture in the companies in those meetings.
Yeah.
And trust me, I've been against my will and brought into these meetings. You got to tell me how the thing works. And I've seen gnarly meetings, and I've seen where it goes wrong, and that's where the culture of the company I think is seen. And ultimately, that's what we'll see what happens and which companies are taking advantage of that. But those are the places that people get stuck.
Yeah.
So make sure you do your due diligence, or you're going to end up like
Right.
Ross just said. That's not good.
I
to
do
avoid
think
the
there's
gnarly
a
meetings.
change too. There's chief data officers, there's chief technical officers now that are helping in this evolution, because I think you're right. A lot of the times people are like, what are you talking about? What was wrong, And now with like a chief data officer of a chief technical officer, I think that we might get a little more understanding in kind of where we're going. But yeah, I totally agree.
If you can go back and model what you've done historically on the new currency before you actually execute it, maybe you'll save your job.
Yeah.
Right.
Or this is how you get your promotion. I've seen people get
Yeah.
promoted because of this.
Amazing.
It's because the person takes it and knows how to have the conversation. I've seen agencies that were about to get canned that didn't because of this. So it's a two-edged sword. Like, this is how you put the nail in the coffin because you don't know how to speak about it, or this is how you save your business and make more money and you transform advertising into a profit center, not a cost center.
Yep.
And all the time you have CMOs being like, help me, I'm getting reamed by my board. This last year sucked.
Yeah.
It's the year of efficiency, Wall Street up my ass. I don't know how to speak about the value of my job. And you come and you give them some data that tells them how they're working, and then they're loyal to it. So it is literally either what will sink you or what can make you, and it's about learning how to have the right conversation and being educated about it, and that's really the difference.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, to that point, I think the last question I have for you all is to take out your crystal balls and dust them off and think about, 3 to 5 years down the road, what are the opportunities that we don't even consider yet? What are the ways that we might use this data that we're not even talking about yet? What should this room daydream about coming in 3 to 5 years? So I'm going to do reverse order, Ross, so you get to go first.
Oh, man, I don't know.
You can pass and we can come back to you.
Yeah,
if you'd
come
like.
back to me.
Joe, how about you?
Well, I was mentioning earlier when I was at Google, but I didn't really explain why I was there. I think everyone in this room is familiar with what may be considered the largest ad model online, which is Google AdWords. And many of you that know me know that I used to have a performance-based agency. Started it in 1989. And we would work with television stations, between them and advertisers, and using traditional direct response, we would provide opportunities where the stations would guarantee results and advertisers would pay based on results. It didn't escape me that Google was doing this online with pay-per-click. And then I also noticed they were coming into television, and I sat down with them and I said, why are you doing it on a CPM basis when you've literally created a performance-based model online that's killing it? Mm-hmm. There's nothing like it. Why wouldn't you come into television and do something similar? And they're like, oh no, that model never will take off. We got to trade on traditional currency. And I thought they were nuts, to be honest with you. But I do think if you look at online and how performance is the mainstream online and how advertising is so very different. We have these bid environments, you have Google with a black box optimizing everything, and believe me, you've heard today the complexity of optimizing all this stuff. So, eventually you see the growth of ad networks that may be performance-based, especially on the DR side, that would resonate. And it'll be a portion of the industry. But we'll go in and we will bid, and this software will figure out how to optimize and how to leverage all these different things that we're talking about today. We won't even have to lift a finger. And we're just paying based on results. And the media is going to get a good rate of return because, again, everything's optimized, everything's targeted. Nobody understands what the actual benefit dollars are, which is great because everyone will use it as a remnant strategy. Because if you're a publisher online and you have remnant inventory, how do you sell it? You throw it into Google AdWords and you don't worry about it coming back to bite you because nobody knows what the currency and what the dollars are. They just know, hey, they're bidding for X, they're getting Y, and everyone's happy. So I predict that all of this measurement, all of this new currency, at least in the DR space, we will see automated platforms that will be based on results, and boy, it will sure make our lives a lot easier, won't it?
That's awesome. Thank you. Tara, how about you? What do you see?
I definitely see, more use cases with data collaboration and in clean rooms. Clean rooms is something that's spoken about a lot now, but I think we're pretty nascent in the use cases. Doing 20 plus years of upfronts, being able to do an upfront, collaborating with data, media exposure, ad exposure, pulling insights from that, pulling use cases. I really think the opportunities are endless, but we have to continue to do the work as an industry to kind of figure out what can be done. You reduce the hops, the data is in a clean room and you're able to do so much more with it. So I'm so excited to see what that's gonna bring for us. How far we can go with the use cases, how far we can kind of activate and measure and not have that data leave. and be very transparent in how you use that data, and privacy centric. So that's kind of what I'm really excited for.
So the opportunity almost to take an advertiser's first-party data, match it against the viewership in a clean room, and then negotiate based on that.
Yep. First
Very cool.
and third party data, enhance that,
Yeah.
and negotiate off it. I think that would be really cool. Those use cases are going, the speed of the upfront will be, incredible, and kind of what can be done is going to be really major for the industry.
Beating 6 months
Yes.
is what we should be able to
Yes.
do, you would think. Ross, did you get your Windex out?
Yeah. I got one. I think combining creative into the mix here. I think we are we're moving pretty fast on the media side of things. What audience, at what frequency, at what media format, all this kind of stuff is in that way. I think that's happening fast. I mean, look at a year ago, 0 to billions.
Yeah.
Clean room stuff I agree with. We are in production only in clean rooms with some partners. This is public, Disney, NBCU, YouTube, Amazon, Meta. These are some things that have gone from non-clean rooms to clean rooms in the years, and the rest are going to follow. So I agree with that. But I think what I haven't seen yet as a starting point that I think could be cool in 3 to 5 years would be then how do you put the creative into that mix too, to know what creative at what audience at what price, on what currency, because that's another vector and sector of optimizing. And right now it's pretty generic.
Right.
They're just saying, creative is over here, audience is over here, currency is over here, and what I'm buying over here by budget. Think about it as a SKU. It's how much money goes to what creative, by what audience, by what publisher, by what currency. It's that's the SKU, and how do you think about your whole SKU in that kind of way?
Right.
I think would be cool.
Well, and this audience certainly knows to optimize to creative based on those last touch attribution methodologies that they're using. So to be able to take that rigor and bring it to this new world would be very cool. Thank you for that. I think we're going to jump to Q&As, but before we do, this is for my own crystal ball. I'd love to see a show of hands, anyone that has tested a new currency or plans to in the next 3 months. We got none. So my crystal ball says if we come back here next fall, we're going to get probably half the room will have raised their hands. So we'll see. Any questions for these groups, this group? We got one right here, Tom.
We are recording, so that's the mic.
Yeah, hi. This question is for Ross. Ross, I'm Leif Welch with Jamloop. You mentioned that I think you said something like 95% of the cases where you're running a campaign, there's some sort of an outcome that's tracked.
Yeah.
Can you give a couple of examples of what those types of outcomes might be?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for asking. So it's vertical by vertical specific. So we've seen of the outcomes, I'd say half are the client first party that they're bringing directly, and the other half would be usually third party. So some examples of that could be for third party, location-based vendors who came to my store, like a Foursquare or IRI credit cards, or we've seen things like Polk for auto. We've seen PharmaScript companies like Swoop or Crossix data be included into that. On first party data, like some of our clients will bring in their subscription data information, mobile app information of who's signing in and buying products, website traffics. Those are kind of things that we've seen, across the board, and all those are attached in some sort of MTA analysis. Some have incrementality and lift that they'll put attached to it, but it's cool because the currency allows you, because it's the same methodology of the big data. So it's just kind of one campaign where you're measuring households and devices and persons, and you can kind of offshoot the combination of that. So even though you're not doing it as a currency, which is where I think there's confusion between measurement and currency, but the same campaign, the same infrastructure can give you multiple measurement and give you guarantees, and you can tie the two together and drive that.
I think that's where there seems to be a huge opportunity for so many performance marketers have started to make this leap into advanced measurement and moving beyond last touch. And so now to think about, you can take that structure and rigor and apply it to the front end where you're negotiating so that you understand the value, that you're transacting on the value. That's really the opportunity to take, all what probably many of you have been focused on for the last 3 to 5 years or more and pull that up into the front end. Anyone else?
Sorry, this is for Ross and for iSpots. Michael Collette. I'm with a company called TV Scientific. We're a performance marketing platform. So I'm curious about how performance marketing and currency lives in a world with multiple parallel currencies. So when we compare, the U.S. dollar to the euro or the pound, those are totally different currency domains that have some sort of floating point conversion. But when iSpot and VideoAmp measure the same thing and they come up with different results, you actually have a conversation, right? You have maybe a conflict over the truth. How does that work? Because it seemed like in a Nielsen-based hegemony, we didn't have that problem. Everybody traded off of one set of numbers. Those are the numbers. You might have hated them, but they were the numbers. Now we've got 4 sets of numbers. And you were sort of saying that's kind of starting to resolve. I'm kind of curious, in today's world, do we have a Tower of Babel, or do we have 4 ways of measuring the same thing and so forth? How does that work?
You want to go first?
Well, I think the theme here is that these new currency measurements, or this new currency is backed by measurement and business outcomes. Again, we're talking about multi-touch attribution, and advertisers are realizing how efficient this is. I mean, iSpot, for example, its core business was working, and has been for years, working directly with brands. And these brands obviously are facing the Nielsen currency, and they're also looking at, whether they're trading on it or not, they're looking at the iSpot currency. Mentioned earlier about the opportunities for arbitrage and things of this nature, but at the end of the day, they're looking at how their KPIs are growing and improving. And that gives them a comfort level that this currency here is more accurate. Nothing's going to be perfect, but it's a lot more accurate because it is affecting my business outcomes in a positive way. It's measurable. It's hard to say that about legacy currency, right?
First of all, disclaimer, I love this guy. He was one of the first crazy people that he sold his business to Vizio from Cognitive, and was one of our first data sources to go away from panels into using Vizio TV. So without this guy, I don't think we'd be here a long time ago. How long was that, like 8 years ago? Like 10 years ago. Yeah, so I love this guy. But outside of that, to answer your question, I thought the same thing for a while about how it's going to work. Is there going to be like arbitraging trading, like currency tradings, and someone who's buying and selling on currencies? And so this is what I've learned since. When I was working with the agencies and they asked me this question because they were complaining, they didn't want to do the work because they want to go home at like 3. I was like, well, like, how are you doing this today? And I saw that they had all these expressions for demo bands in Nielsen. And they say my rate card for 18 to 49 is 20, my rate card for females 18 to 34 is the following, males this. And I was like, honestly, those are different currencies in its own right. Sure, it's all Nielsen, but you're expressing your rate card in a segment, right, as a different rate. So that's, in theory, already a different currency. So now you're exploding that. You have 5 rows today. For Nielsen, you might have 5 for VideoAmp or 5 from others, whatever. Ultimately, they already do expressions from the buy side and the sell side of this, and having it just being more is one thing. So once we change to be like, just add rows here, it's scaled in that way. Then the question for arbitrage comes down to how the sell side prices. And so there are some where they do it's the same unit cost no matter what the currency is. So I'm going to get $2,000 for this unit, irregardless of whether iSpot says high, VideoAmp says low, Nielsen is baseline. So you're getting the same, so it just auto corrects to that. And others, it's case by case basis, right? It depends. So there are negotiations that come down into looking at the expressions, just as there was Nielsen. Because some buyers would say, I'm going to go buy females over here, males over here, and change my audience. So the game's the same. There's just more options. I don't see it as it's changing.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I think we have one in the back, Tom, if
All
you
right,
have
we
time.
got time for one more.
Thank you. Frank Cornell, I'm with Orca TV. We've got about 3,500 streaming channels, so we're pretty big on the supply side and fast. I think one of the things that I want to check with you folks is we're seeing on fast television, free ad-supported TV, only about 35% of our inventory is sold on programmatic, which is how everybody buys most of the fast TV time today. So that leaves 65% of many billion impressions per month unsold. So when you start talking about currency, I used to work for Joseph long ago, and we had a testing network, which he invented, which helped create a kind of a gold scale of media. We would run like 20,000 impressions on a cable system and an MSO, and we would come up with a price point. It was a gold scale of media, which is kind of the definition of currency, I think. So I wonder if some discussions might be had about setting definitions of currency through the IAB, which is the Interactive Advertising Board, which kind of sets the standards. Like, for instance, there is a setting in the IAB when you go to your DSP to buy on a cost per action basis. So what is that action? It has to be defined and programmed. So just some thoughts about currency in the fast space. Wondered if you had any.
Well, I think it's going to be fluid. If I'm hearing you correctly, Frank, we're really talking about what I alluded to earlier, which is performance-based media and how DR may change and be enabled by all of this measurement, targeting, et cetera. Getting into something equivalent to like a Google AdWords model. And I think it's going to be fluid because, as you said, everything's translated. So if I go in with a particular definition of a lead or a sale, and the platform like Google does essentially will kind of test the campaign and kind of understand at the end of the day what's the revenue that's coming out of this. We can change the levers all over the place, but what's the revenue that's coming out of this, and give you a feedback loop like that's not enough of a bid, hence you get preempted. You're not going to get the media that you want, and this is all built into these online models, right? So inevitably it adjusts. It's dynamic. It adjusts. You get the feedback you want as an advertiser, so you adjust if you want to hit your goals. Otherwise, you're going to get preempted. You're not going to hit your numbers. But it's all based on dynamic bid rates and real-time calculations, and it has to be adjusted all the time. And when we bid media in traditional DR, we're looking week to week. Things are changing. So I think what we've always done is going to be baked into these models. So we're going to have that latitude in terms of how we define something. I don't think we need to turn to a third party for that.
I mean, I would just say that turning to a third party, there are committees out there. I mean, you brought up the IAB. There's also the Joint Industry Committee. I think that the industry as a whole was looking for some guidelines and regulations in this currency conversation. I think that can translate to other areas, identity, big data, tech, all these things are must-haves, and that's how these measurement partners are going to be graded by this Joint Industry Committee. I think the IAB is doing similar stuff, and I think as we move along, there's things to learn. But the guidelines and the jointness, I want to say, for the industry getting together to create this stuff is going to help us move forward.
Yeah. I think that's what we wanted to share with you all. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Wonderful conversation. We appreciate it.